Good afternoon. My name is Joel Glassman. I'm the Executive Vice President of World Affairs St. Louis, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to today's program, a visit with the Ambassador of Uzbekistan to the United States. Our special program is presented by World Affairs St. Louis and the International Relations Council, our counterpart organization in Kansas City. Both organizations seek to add an international perspective to our respective communities, and we're very pleased and proud to be working together on this program. I also want to acknowledge and offer special thanks to Webster University for providing financial underwriting for this program. Our distinguished guest speaker today is His Excellency Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Republic of Uzbekistan to the United States and Canada, Javlon Vakhabov. Before introducing Ambassador Vakhabov, let me say a few words about Uzbekistan. The land that is now Uzbekistan was once at the heart of the ancient Silk Road trade connecting China with the Middle East and Europe. The country spent most of the past 200 years as part of first the Russian Empire and then the Soviet Union, only emerging as an independent state when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. Current President Mirziyoyev, who assumed the presidency after his election in 2016, has sought to move the country beyond its international isolation and extractive economy. These changes in Uzbekistan make it especially appropriate for us to start paying more attention to a country that presents many potential economic opportunities for partnership, especially for Missouri. On the national strategy side of things, following the 9/11 terrorist attacks on the United States, Uzbekistan allowed the US to use an airbase in their country to prosecute the war in Afghanistan. That relationship ended in 2005 when the US was asked to withdraw its forces. More recently, relations between the two countries have begun to warm once again. Uzbekistan is also located in a very complicated neighborhood, and it seeks in its foreign relations to maintain a balance in its relations with Russia, other Asian nations, including China, and the 4 Central Asian states and Turkey, with whom Uzbekistan shares an Islamic heritage. This program will provide an opportunity for Missourians to learn about this little understood but rapidly advancing part of the world. As I mentioned, it's a great privilege for us to have the official representative of Uzbekistan to the United States as our speaker today. He assumed this position as ambassador to the United States just 3 years ago, in October 2017, and 1 year later, in November 2018, Canada was added to his portfolio, although he remains in residence in Washington, D.C. Ambassador Vakhabov, before serving as ambassador to the United States, served as the first deputy minister in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of his country. His entire working career has been with the Foreign Ministry, beginning in 2001. His education was in his home country of Uzbekistan. He attended university in Tashkent. As I say, it's a great privilege to have him here. Let me lay out the scope for this afternoon's program. The ambassador will speak for 20 plus or minus minutes. After that, he's available to answer our questions. Please send your questions via the Q&A function on your Zoom program. If you're with us on Zoom, then you have the Q&A function, so you can send your questions to me. After the ambassador concludes his remarks, I will pose your questions to him. In the interest of time, I may need to combine some of your questions, but we will try to get to all of them. Ambassador, thank you for agreeing to join us today. And let me invite you to proceed with your remarks.
Dear Dr. Glassman, Ms. Lohr, ladies and gentlemen, our guests. So thank you so much for this very kind introduction. It's my absolute delight and great pleasure to greet such a wonderful audience today, not in a so traditional way that we get used to, but still a good opportunity to meet you all. And today, I will try to focus on my remarks, so on the achievements that my country was able to achieve over the last 3.5 years, almost 4 years since the new administration came to power. And of course, we'll try to highlight some aspects of US-Uzbekistan bilateral relations. And I'll be very, very happy to take your questions at the end of my presentation. So let me start. I guess you see this slide on the screen. So St. Louis, Missouri. So it's not a new destination to me. So almost, yes, more than 2 years passed since I visited Missouri, where I was warmly welcomed by Governor Parson, local business community representatives, other officials, and of course the leadership of the Webster University that is based in St. Louis. And here I would like to stress on how the entire trip, entire visit to Missouri went very productive in terms of, again, those achievements that I was able to bring to my home. And what I'm talking exactly about is mostly related to the Webster University. So actually the next year in 2019, here at the embassy in Washington, D.C., so we've signed, actually our arrangements resulted in the signing of the agreement on the launching of the Webster University's campus in Uzbekistan. And I should also note that the Webster University has become the first American educational institution ever existed not only in Uzbekistan, but in the entire region of Central Asia. So since that time, I should note that almost 500 students have been enrolled by the Webster's campus in the capital, the city of Tashkent. It's operating pretty successful, and currently we are considering the proposal that was made by the leadership of the university to expand its activity across the country. Hopefully another campus that is supposed to be launched and will be hopefully established in the eastern part of Uzbekistan, that is mostly known as the Fergana Valley, that shares common border with neighboring Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Kazakhstan. So with respect to the businesses, I still remember our very fruitful discussions at the Monsanto's office in St. Louis. So you know well, I believe you know well that Uzbekistan is mostly agricultural nation, where more than 60% of the population are engaged in the ag sector, and 25 revenues, export revenues, are mostly generated also by the ag, and almost 19% of our GDP is also generated by the agriculture. And in these terms, so the collaboration with such leading firms from Missouri is vitally important to Uzbekistan, where the entire ag sector is currently being modified. So just in a few words about the country. So Uzbekistan, so mostly known as a medium-sized country that I today represent. So by its size, it's very close to the size of the state of California or even Spain. So as you can see on the globe, it is located at the heart of Euro-Asian region in an area called Central Asia. It is a little, as I had mentioned, bigger than California in size and has more than 34 million people. So our language, our native language is Uzbek. Russian comes second as an unofficial language, and the third language that is becoming unofficial, so is English. So the capital, as I had mentioned, is the city of Tashkent, the biggest city, by the way, in the region of Central Asia. So, and of course, the pandemic that actually touched all the parts of the entire globe. So, and as many countries have been facing, so the COVID-19 pandemic was the most unexpected strong windstorm that crashed all our plans across the world in our modern history. And I would like to shortly stop at the pandemic situation in Uzbekistan. So we are all witnessing how pandemic has hit all of us unprepared and still causing serious harm to our national economies. So at present, about 66,000 people are infected with COVID-19, and unfortunately 554 died. We had the first epics in April when we had less than 2,000 active cases. And unfortunately, reopened the economy and easing quarantine measures, bringing back over hundreds of thousands of our citizens from abroad who were stuck there, dividing our regions even into red, yellow, and even green zones, did not work as we have anticipated. And as a result, so cases skyrocketed both among locals and newly arrived, almost 52% among those who have been brought back to Uzbekistan from abroad. And as you can see from the graph, the second epochs of active cases lay at the end of the July with about 10,000 cases, which is almost 20 times more than during the first outbreak in Uzbekistan. So now we have slowed down at around 2,500 active cases. So the next slide, reopening. After lessons learned from two waves of the spread and based it on best international expertise, we decided to start reopening our economy for the second time. And of course, it was a hard decision, as nobody knows the real outcomes of reopening. However, we have to think about the economic situation in the country and, of course, the well-being of the ordinary people. And therefore, starting from August, we began the process of lifting country-wide lockdowns, and now most of the restrictions are gone. Still, we every part of our life, so without exaggeration, affected by COVID rules like wearing masks, social distancing, sanitizing, and etc. So with respect to international flights, so I should note that most of those flights have been already resumed. So moreover, so we have started in-person teaching since September. So tourism destinations are now open to public. Economic sector is almost fully resumed in order to support our local healthcare workers. So experts from China, Korea, Germany, Russia, Turkey have arrived to support Uzbekistan in fight against COVID-19. So the next slide is about the national GDP increase. So some economics, according to the World Bank report released yesterday evening, so the COVID-19 pandemic has sunk the global economy into the deepest recession in 8 decades. So in the emerging and developing countries of Europe and Central Asia, so GDP is expected to contract 4.4% in 2020, and Uzbekistan's GDP is expected to increase by 0.6%, followed by 4.8% increase in 2021. And so in this regard, Uzbekistan is one of the of the 2 countries and the biggest economy among 23 countries showing positive dynamics. So the next slide, trade turnover. Yeah. One of the interesting phenomena that we have observed during the pandemic is the behavior of our exports and imports. So as you can see from this chart, the volume of exports in 2020 are almost catching the levels of 2019 with a minor change. And the same cannot be indicated on import side, where you can see 3 billion difference in the numbers of 2019 and 2020. So this graph is a clear illustration of success of government measures to support domestic economy and exporters. And according to our forecast, so we will even have an increase of total exports by the end of this year, in with respect to previous one. So, and of course, representing my country here in the United States, I would like to let you know how the pandemic affected our bilateral trade. So, of course, negatively. And you can see that American companies started the year with positive trend in January and February, while the dynamic turned completely opposite. So since then, with minor exception of May, and according to the data I have, so we bought U.S. goods worth of almost $500 million last year during January and August. So this number decreased 3 times. To 160 million in 2020, showing how badly it affected the U.S. enterprises. So despite pandemic difficulties, so we stayed committed to our early commitments and purchased 6 of 7 Boeing 787 Dreamliners that had been contracted in 2018. So we haven't canceled the contract, so we remain committed to our obligations, and so the last Boeing 787 hopefully will be shipped to Uzbekistan, so by the end of this year. So next slide is mostly about is telling about the exports from Uzbekistan to the United States. So on contrary, the trend doesn't severely change with regard to the exports from Uzbekistan to the US. And over the same period of January to August, so the difference is only $1 million between 2019 and 2020. So, and due to new export contracts signed recently, we expect that in 2020 we might even have around 10% increase in our exports to the United States. And just recently, USDA approved new 10 egg import items such as beans, mung bean, chickpea, peanuts, almonds, walnuts, dried raisins, dried apricots, and others. So, and good news is that, so loved by all of you, I believe, those who have already tasted, Uzbek melons should also get permission to be imported to the United States by the beginning of 2021. So the next slide is telling the investment climate reforms that we have started implementing in the country since 2016. I'm not going again in the interest of time. I'm not going to repeating what you are seeing on the screen. But one of the achievements that I would like to draw your attention is the free floating exchange rate that we have introduced in 2017. So we have, and of course, along this milestone achievement, we have lifted all restrictions on purchase and sale of foreign currency. And a number of new laws were adopted to welcome foreign enterprises in Uzbekistan. So please turn to the next slide. Yes, FDI flow. So as a result, as you may see on the screen, and as the diagram tells us, so the FDI to our country has spiked. Last year, it reached over $9 billion. Yes, $9 billion, which is almost 5 times more than 4 years ago. And here you may see the companies that are currently operating in Uzbekistan. And here I would like to point out those who are that are regarded to the U.S. Honeywell that is engaged in oil and gas sector in Uzbekistan. So Coca-Cola that has been expanding its presence in my country since early 90s. When the USSR collapsed and Uzbekistan became an independent nation. Of course, here you can see also, I can't see, but I think it should be also updated. General Motors that has 2 plants in Uzbekistan, and one of them has been built in late of 90s, where more than 10 types of Chevrolet currently assembled. So the entire country, just for your information, is full of Chevys nowadays. And another plant that was built in the mid of 2000s, so is currently producing engines for those 10 types of Chevys, and of course engines that we are currently supplying to the United States as well. So with respect to US-Uzbekistan relations, here on the slide, yes, I have to note that Uzbekistan-American relations have been on a strong rise. So despite pandemic, we have hosted a number of high-level delegations from US government. So here I would like to stop on several connected with US officials. So as you might be aware, the first visit of DFC CEO Adam Boyle went very productive and promising. So the itinerary was full of meetings with high-level local officials that resulted in tangible outcomes. And currently we are working on almost 30 specific investment projects in agriculture, light industry, pharmaceuticals, and building materials production. And moreover, there is a possibility of creating financial resources with equity participation of the DFC and Uzbekistan government, with the prospect of attracting of governments of other countries of Central Asia and Afghanistan was also one of the acute issues. And I'm talking about the regional investment fund that we are currently considering together with our together with the US partners. So the Uzbekistan government has already expressed its willingness to allocate almost $1 billion to this regional investment fund. So, and the same part, the same share is supposed to be done by the DFC, and we expect the approval by neighboring countries as well. So another dimension, women empowerment was a central topic in our relations, is still central topic, and it was also discussed at the meeting Adam Boyle, with the first woman chairperson of the Uzbekistan Senate, Madam Narbayeva, who actually is in the role of vice president of Uzbekistan. So, and most of, as most of you must be familiar, there is a parliamentary group for cooperation between Uzbekistan and the United States, caucus, Congressional Caucus on Uzbekistan of the U.S. House of Representatives, that also greatly supports so democratic reforms and formation of civil society in Uzbekistan. So in order to, please, another slide, yes, C5+1. In order to sustain the agenda of our cooperation, we have regular two formats of regular high-level meetings. So the first is annual bilateral consultations between two governments. In 2 weeks, we are expecting Foreign Minister of Uzbekistan to visit Washington, D.C. With his delegation. Meetings are scheduled at the White House, State Department, and other agencies. So another format is the ministerial meeting of heads of foreign ministries of Central Asian countries in the United States. So this year alone, we had two of those. So the first was in the beginning of the year when Secretary Pompeo attended C5+1 ministerial meeting in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. And recently we held another second ministerial, so via online video conferencing, which was hosted again by Secretary Pompeo. So actually here I would like to conclude my presentation and actually welcome your questions. I tried to be very brief, again, anticipating the questions that I'm looking forward to answering.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. We appreciate your enthusiastic words, and we have quite a few questions from our audience. So why don't I start with those questions? One of our first questions, right at the top of your remarks, was when do you expect American tourists to be welcome again in Central Asia?
So as I had mentioned above, so at this moment, there are no restrictions at all in terms of entering the country. So the only requirement that the government has imposed to foreigners is to get negative COVID test prior to the departure for Uzbekistan, at least 72 hours before they leave for Uzbekistan. So in these terms, actually, the country is open to host the guests from the United States, and we will be more than happy to have all of them.
We have a question about the Aral Sea. With the decrease of the size of the Aral Sea to only 10 to 15% of its size just a few decades ago, what is the government doing to minimize the many negative effects caused by the shrinkage of this sea and the environmental impact that this is having on the country?
So thank you for this question. By saying how we are, how my government is very much committed to the people who are residing in that area that was destructively affected by the desiccation of the Aral Sea, fourth biggest lake in the world that has already gone. I would like to start with the recent event took place here in New York in a virtual way. I'm talking about the UNGA session that was attended by the President of Uzbekistan, who actually highlighted a series of key initiatives. And among those several initiatives, I would like to point out one of them that is directly related to the Aral Sea. So actually, he came up with the initiative to declare the RLC, the region, RLC region, an area of ecological innovation and technologies, and of course, International Day for the Protection and Restoration of Ecosystems. So, and beside that, so currently, not currently, just 2 years ago, yes, 2 years ago, so Uzbekistan has initiated to establish, under the auspices of the United Nations, trusteeship fund that was fully endorsed by the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who actually launched this fund here in America, in New York. And beside that, we saw that many of our partners, in particular in Europe and in Asia, and I'm talking about the several European Union countries, in particular, the United Kingdom, Finland, Norway, and Japan, and other countries have already allocated fundings just to restore the areas that have been affected by this disaster. So beside that, on a domestic, on a national point, so the government. So over the last 3.5 years, the government has allocated almost $1.5 billion to the areas that have been affected by this disaster. So, and again, as you may see, of course, if you raise the statistics, you may definitely see how the entire region of Karakalpakstan Pakistan is currently changing.
We have another environmental type of question. Are you concerned about the pollution that results from the production of pharmaceuticals, similar to what's happening in both China and India?
So, sometimes when I meet with my counterpart here in the United States or even neighboring Canada that I'm covering also as a full-fledged ambassador, I say that Uzbekistan, again, being located in the heart of Eurasia, is also blessed not having a common border with such countries that you have mentioned. And in this regard, so it's a big, I should say, it's the biggest advantage. But at the same time, the biggest disadvantage, of course, is mostly related to the seaports that we're still trying to reach out to unlock the entire country. And with respect to environmental concerns, so I should note that actually the vast majority of pharmaceuticals that we are currently consuming are imported from abroad, almost 80–85%, I should note. And of course, they might be brought, of course, from India, from China, from the European Union, and other destinations. So in these terms, so as a country, I can say that we are affected by those plants or factories currently operating in those countries that you have pointed out. But in terms of international obligations, that I should note that Uzbekistan has become the latest nation that joined the Paris Accord. Again, being an integral part of these obligations, so we remain committed to our obligations. In particular, those provisions that are enshrined by the Paris Agreement. So that's the way how we are actually tackling these challenges.
You began with comments about the COVID-19 pandemic. You mentioned that there was a lockdown in your country early on. How was the lockdown enforced?
So, at the very beginning, so I'm talking about the first lockdown. I should note that it was not so easy to convince the people to wear masks, to make sure that they are socially distanced or even sanitizing hands and etc. As I believe as everywhere across the globe, so the people so perceived this invisible virus, not so actually took this invisible virus not seriously as the government has convinced. And actually, so so the first step, the first and foremost measure is that the government has that has been taken by the government was mostly related to our international flights. We've actually suspended all both international and domestic flights. And with respect to the travels among the regions, and we do have 14 provinces across the country, so we've actually isolated every province in Uzbekistan, and actually suspending any travels within the country. So with respect to groceries, with respect to purchases, so and even the cars movement within the capital in particular, so all these movements have been also strictly prohibited by the government. And actually the people have been staying at home for more than a month, and I'm talking about the first lockdown. And as I had mentioned, when we started reopening the economy, unfortunately we made several mistakes again due to the people's behavior. So the first lockdown actually failed. And being well experienced, we've slightly turned to the next lockdown. Again, closing, shutting down the entire country, and even the international flights that haven't been resumed since the first lockdown. And with respect to the foreigners, I mean, with respect to our citizens who were stuck abroad, that was another. I wouldn't say that that was a mistake, but it was not so easy. Actually, it was too hard to handle all of them, and since early March, so we've been able to bring almost 100,000 Uzbekistanis back home. And as a result, most of them, of course, so came back to Uzbekistan, even being infected. And as I have mentioned in my remarks, so the number of these people who have been brought back to Uzbekistan was almost 52–53%. Again, in comparison to those who have been staying in Uzbekistan, 48%. So that actually these measures were the key, were the main in terms of again imposing in terms of measures that have been imposed by the government to address this challenge.
We have some questions about education in your country. What percentage of the population has completed secondary school? What percentage of the population has completed higher education, college education? And are the percentages different for men and women?
So with respect to the education itself. So I should note that so the level of literacy in Uzbekistan is about 98%. So the education itself remains mandatory. So with respect to again, I'm not sure with exact figures that I would like to share with you, but for the second, almost 100% of the entire population are getting access to the secondary education, and up to 15% have an access to higher education. So again, in terms of numbers, you know, more than 60% of our population are the youth under the age 30. That is about 17 million people. Again, given the fact that the entire country is inhabited by more than 34. And with respect to the students, to the number of students that are graduating from universities and other higher level educational institutions, that's about 500,000 people a year. And actually this yes, and we are aimed at increasing this number to 25% in 5 years. So that is our objective to achieve in the years to come. But again, the secondary education, just wanted to reiterate, is obligatory, and almost 100% of our kids, all of them actually, are going to the school, and of course universities and other educational institutions. And one more point that I would like to again take in this opportunity. So today Uzbekistan has been positioning itself as an educational hub for the entire region. What I mean exactly, you know, today Uzbekistan is a home for 17 leading foreign universities that have launched their own campuses in Uzbekistan. So, and the Webster University is among them. So, and again, it means that for what reasons we are bringing so many foreign universities to Uzbekistan, and of course to address those requests coming again from the people of Uzbekistan, and in particular those youngsters, 17 million people, those who are under the age of 30, and people who are actually thirsty for new knowledges. And for these reasons, so we are welcoming foreign campuses in Uzbekistan, and one of the most successful projects that we've been able to implement together with our American partners, again, was the Webster University's campus currently operating in the capital of Uzbekistan.
I have a question here that asks you to compare your responsibilities as the Uzbek representative to the United States with your duties as Uzbek representative to Canada. Can you offer some comparison about what your specific duties are in these two perhaps different roles?
Sure. You know, my first and foremost task is to represent my country here where I'm based in the United States. And actually, so in 2017, when my nominee was approved by the Uzbekistan Senate, so actually I was later appointed by the president as an ambassador of Uzbekistan to the United States. Again, comparing with another very small nation, I would say, Canada. Of course, it is significantly different from those duties that I'm carrying out here as a chief of Uzbekistan mission in the United States. So, what exactly I mean, since my tenure started, we've been able to enrich, to broaden US-Uzbekistan relations. In particular, so my president paid an official visit to the United States in May of 2018. So we have actually broadened our business to business ties, having signed the contracts amounting almost $7.5 billion. That are resulted in the increase of bilateral trade turnover up to $600 million since 2016. And again, comparing with Canada, so the trade turnover with that country, of course, remains very low, about $25–30 million annually. Again, with respect to diplomatic representative offices, so we do not have the Canadian embassy in Uzbekistan yet. So Uzbekistan is mostly is covered by the Canadian diplomatic missions that is based in Moscow. Again, with respect to the United States, so we are represented, I would say, respectively. Since early 90s, when Uzbekistan was recognized as an independent nation by the United States, and of course later by Canada. With respect to Canada, so we are currently working on launching our separate diplomatic rep office that will be based in Ottawa. So, and currently I'm trying to cover both of them, but again, it's not so easy. Given the fact that even sometimes I perceive the entire United States not just as single nation, a single country, but mostly as a place that is consists of 50 nations where I represent my country. So in these terms, I think we should have another separate division, separate rep office in neighboring Canada. So, and just in addition to those words that I have mentioned, just a couple of months ago, so my government, in particular the Senate, has approved my nominee to represent Uzbekistan in another very small country here in Americas. Yes, Brazil. So we're not still represented there in Latin America, and hopefully we'll be able to launch our diplomatic rep office very soon. Even since my nominee approved by the Uzbekistan Senate, I still unable to present my credentials to the Brazilian president. So the entire country shut down, and the president is currently not receiving the heads of diplomatic missions. And now I'm not sure whether I represent my country in Brazil or not, since I was not able even to present my credentials to the leadership of this country.
We have a question about cooperation between the 5 Central Asian countries that, of course, include Uzbekistan. You said a little bit about, you mentioned that in your presentation, but what kind of future are we looking at in Central Asia? Are we looking at the possibility of something like the European Union in Central Asia, or are the 5 countries so different and independent of each other that there's not much prospect for further intensive collaboration?
Sure. So before I start answering this question, just would like to refer to the article that was released by the Forbes just a few yes, a month ago, again, telling about the big hope for stability in Central Asia. So in this regard, just so I highly recommend to read this article in order to understand what kind of change are currently taking place in the entire region of Central Asia. And you know, again, comparing with what we have had prior to 2016, when the new government came to power in Uzbekistan, so you may have a clear understanding what exactly happened in the region of Central Asia. And just briefly saying, you know, there hasn't been a time in the modern history of the entire region of Central Asia when all countries of this part of the world were so much supportive, were so much engaged and involved in terms of resolving decades disputed issues on water resources management issues, on border control, on trade investment, on transport and communication, etc. And this administration in Uzbekistan has been a facilitator of the regional dynamics of partnership with its I would say with our own, the president's neighbors first policy. And over the past 4 years, Uzbekistan's bilateral trade with neighboring states have grown almost 5-fold. And moreover, we started looking at Afghanistan not as a threat, but as an opportunity. And we are trying to connect it to Central Asia economically, which should be fundamental in securing peace and stability in the country and region. And President of Uzbekistan, so the gentleman whom you have mentioned in your remarks, His Excellency Shavkat Mirziyoyev, has launched a wide-ranging reform program that is making considerable progress, especially on economic liberalization. So, and you know, Uzbekistan's economic modernization and increased political openness would have huge implications for economic growth and political stability across Central Asia. So, and answering your question, directly with regard to whether we might have in the nearest future some sort of European Union known integration processes. I should note that since 2016, so again, the leadership of Uzbekistan came up with the initiative to establish so-called consultative meetings of all Central Asian countries' leaders. So, and as a result, so the first presidential summit took place in Nur-Sultan, Kazakhstan, in 2018. The next, another second presidential summit that we have been, has been hosted by Tashkent, last year in 2019. So currently this format is operating is mostly is a consultative meeting in a very informal way. But our hope, when all the leaders of the entire Central Asian region will be able to accept such proposals, of course, we'd like to have much more deepened integration processes in Central Asia. But that is our objectives that we would like to achieve in the years to come. With respect to what exact type of integration that we would like to have, so again, as many experts are telling us and even advising us, so the most appropriate way to start with these integration processes is to adjust what, in particular, what ASEAN has achieved over the last decades, again, bringing to these format the countries that are located in that part of the world.
Let's cast our view a little further beyond Central Asia. What's the status of your country's relationship with China now, in particular the Belt and Road program? How involved is Uzbekistan in the Belt and Road program?
So, you know, Uzbekistan was actually first among others that has endorsed one Belt, One Road initiative that was actually launched, if my mind doesn't change me, in 2015 when the President H.E has announced it in Kazakhstan. So and of course our objectives are very simple and clear. So we would like, so being a part of this initiative, again, being having endorsed this proposal of Beijing, so we have been proceeding from the understanding that this initiative and Uzbekistan's participation in OBOR should meet the people's needs and interests. And what I'm talking exactly about, of course, primarily, so task number one is to unlock Uzbekistan, to reach out the nearest seaports that are located in Pakistan and Iran, just in order to reduce the prices on commodities that we are currently delivering to, in particular, to the South Asia or the European Union, crossing other regions, Caucasus or traditional road to the north, and etc. So in this regard, so we are very much supportive the construction of the railroad that comes from China and goes through neighboring Kyrgyzstan and connects to the Uzbekistan railway system. So by this means, of course, once we succeed, China, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan succeed in implementing this long-awaited project, we'll be able to connect the entire railway systems with neighboring Afghanistan, where we have already accomplished the railway, being the first country in the history of modern Afghanistan that entered this country with its own constructors, with its own railway systems. So the railways that we have already constructed in Afghanistan, so starts from southern part of Afghanistan and connects to Mazar-e-Sharif. So, so the first ever railway ever existed in Afghanistan. So, and our next hope, our next step is to connect so the Mazar-e-Sharif with Pakistan and Peshawar, and of course to reach out the Gwadar seaport. So in these terms, so we are relying on Chinese government support, and in particular mostly focusing on transportation and communication projects currently implemented in the region of Central Asia. So objective number two is mostly about national infrastructure projects that are currently implemented in Uzbekistan. And of course, we are very candid when we are discussing with our counterparts from China, so the scales and even the details with respect to Chinese labor that could be attracted to such infrastructure projects. So we proceed from the understanding that these projects that we are implementing and we are financing ourselves, getting the loans from China, should be met the interests of our people. So for us, it's so to creating jobs is an utmost priority for the current administration. You know, again, given the fact that annually more than 750,000 young Uzbekistanis are entering local labor market. And of course, for this government, for this administration, it's a tough issue to create jobs for them, not for the citizens of China, for the people whom we could attract. Of course, we are bringing those people, and most of them are engineers, so high profile and well qualified so workers that are of course attracted to this or that infrastructure projects currently implemented in Uzbekistan on a temporary basis, but mostly focusing on locals, on creating jobs so within Uzbekistan. So that's the way how we are working with our Chinese partners.
You've mentioned Afghanistan several times as an important frontier for your country. What's your country's position on U.S. troops remaining in Afghanistan? Of course, the U.S. will do what the U.S. chooses to do, but how would you advise or ask the U.S. to stay involved or to leave completely?
You know, since since the new administration in Uzbekistan started implementing so neighbors first policy in the region of Central Asia, including Afghanistan. So we have been deeply involved in both Afghanistan reconciliation process and in efforts aimed at reviving the Afghan economy in a post-war period. So we, we have. So with respect to the first dimension, I would like to point out that Tashkent, the capital of Uzbekistan, so has been hosting twice so the delegation of the movement of Taliban. So the representatives of the Doha office so visited my country and were warmly welcomed by the foreign minister and other high-level officials of Uzbekistan. So we've been, at the same time, so we are closely interacting with the Afghanistani leadership, with the Kabul administration, and every single step in terms of interacting with the movement of Taliban, of course, have been consulted with the Kabul administration. So by this means, so we have even suggested to both sides, both the Kabul administration and the movement of Taliban, to provide them so with the negotiating table, in particular in the city of Samarkand. Beside that, my country was among those 50 nations so that has been invited to the signing ceremony of the peace deal that took place in Doha late February of 2020. So even at this moment, so we are closely interacting with both sides in terms of implementing these arrangements. So with respect to the revival of the Afghan economy, so as I have mentioned, so we have been constructing railways, we are supplying electricity. You know, today the entire city of Kabul is supplied with the electricity coming from Uzbekistan. I'm not sure whether you knew about that or not. And recently we've signed just on the eve of our Independence Day, August 31st, when the foreign minister of Afghanistan has been arriving in Uzbekistan. So we've signed another agreement on supplying electricity to Afghanistan for another 10 years. Much significant deal, and hopefully will help the entire Afghan people to address remaining challenges. So with respect to the withdrawal, so actually our approach fully matches with the US government's vision. So we proceed from the understanding that the withdrawal of US troops and the United States allies in Afghanistan should be condition-based. In these terms, so once we succeed in bringing long-term peace and stability, once we succeed in the reduction of violence in Afghanistan, of course, the troops could leave the country. But at this moment, I believe even the United States government firmly believes the conditions haven't been created yet. Of course, so the number is supposed to be reduced up to 5,000, so till the end of 2020. But at the same time, again, as we have been reassured several times, so this withdrawal should be carried out based on several conditions related again to the reduction of violence. Based on ensuring women rights in Afghanistan, and of course based on safety of the people of Afghanistan. So that's the way how we are actually perceiving the way how the United States troops should be withdrawn from Afghanistan.
We haven't mentioned Russia yet. Perhaps you could say a few words about your country's continuing relationship with Russia.
Of course. You know, Russia historically, I would say even culturally, so has been much closer to Uzbekistan than other countries in the world. So actually we've been coexisting under one umbrella for more than 70 years. In these terms, I would like just to point out just a few facts that the audience should know about that. So nowadays, of course, common history that we are linked to each other. Another one, so Russian-speaking minority, people who are still living in Uzbekistan, almost 1 million people. Another fact, so Russia nowadays is the #2 trade partner of Uzbekistan. Unfortunately, or I'm not sure for what reason, so prior to 2016, Russia has been #1 trade partner of Uzbekistan. So, and in 2016, so it was replaced by China. So currently the volumes of bilateral trade turnover are about $6.5 billion. And the Russian business is mostly focused on oil and gas sector, telecommunications, and engineering. So, and with respect to our people, I mean Uzbekistanis who are currently residing and working mostly as labor migrants in Russia, only 3 million people. People who are currently living in Russia. So, and with respect to transport communications, you know, even in these terms, so we have been mostly using the well-known northern road to deliver our commodities to the European Union, of course, crossing the Russian territory. So these are the key factors actually describing how we are closely interconnected with Russia.
I have a question here about the conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh. What impact does this have on your country? And does your country have any plan to play a role in resolving that conflict?
So, you know, my country is currently presiding in the CIS, so the Commonwealth of Independent States, so another regional organization that has been established after USSR collapsed in 1991. So in these terms, again, given the fact that both of those countries are the members of CIS, so the Uzbekistani presidency in the CIS so has called upon both sides to resolve their disputes in a peaceful manner. And of course, being obliged by so-called Minsk group and led by OSCE and other international obligations. So we actually we are also calling upon to comply with international norms and principles that are enshrined by the United Nations Charter in terms of ensuring territorial integrity, in terms of ensuring the sovereignty and independence of this country. So, and on the other side, so we are also, we've just, not recently, yes, last year, we've become the member of the Turkey Council. So and of course, so being a member of this country and being a member of others, in particular the Organization for Islamic Cooperation. So we have our own obligations in these terms, but at the same time, so every single call that we are, that the Tashkent is addressing to both sides is mostly about to resolve these disputes peacefully. So that is our key approach, resolving the disputes peacefully based on international principles and norms.
We have a request for some practical information from one of our participants. He says that he's an international investor, and he would like to explore doing business in your country. Who would you suggest that he contact, hopefully at your embassy, to explore in greater detail his business opportunities in your country?
So, of course, the embassy is a key point in terms of connecting to respective ministries, agencies, and even private sector representatives in Uzbekistan. So I believe, yes, as you may see on the screen, Akbar Burkanov, who is in charge of trade investments issues at the embassy, so is the right person whom that gentleman or lady could reach out to.
I can testify how helpful he was in setting up this program, so we owe him a great deal of thanks, and I would urge the questioner to not hesitate to contact him. He was most helpful to us. We have a last question, and I'm going to relay the question from the president of our St. Louis World Affairs Council. With already having an anchor, Webster University, and a large presence of Bayer in Missouri, how can we best leverage our relationship in all forms of trade and cultural exchange between Uzbekistan and Missouri? Any ideas for future activities?
So, you know, with respect, just a few areas that might be interesting for Missouri-based companies or enterprises. So first and foremost, as I had mentioned, is the agriculture. Agriculture that is currently modified. So we just recently adopted the new strategy on further development of the Uzbekistan agriculture for 2020, that is meant for 2020-2030. And there's a bunch of objectives that we are going to achieve in the years to come. The second area that you had mentioned, pharmaceuticals. You know, as I have mentioned in my remarks, almost 80–85% of all the medicines that we are consuming are imported from abroad. So another opportunity to launch businesses in Uzbekistan. I mean, pharmaceuticals that could be, of course, exported to Uzbekistan from Missouri. And last point is during my trip, you know, again, if my mind doesn't change me, I visited several manufacturing facilities that are currently producing meat in Missouri. So the meat consumption is another attractive area where the American, I mean, Missouri-based farmers or other manufacturers could be interested in. Again, given the fact that nowadays 70–75% of the meat is abroad, primarily from neighboring Kazakhstan and Mongolia, and I don't see any obstacles and reasons why so the Missouri-based manufacturers could start shipping your own meat to Uzbekistan. And given the fact that just a few months ago, USDA was provided by the Uzbekistan Agriculture Ministry with the certificates, with the permissions that allow the U.S. exporters to deliver the meat, American meat, to the Uzbekistan market without any restrictions.
Well, I think I'm going to say that concludes our program, and let me thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for your very generous time. I mean, you answered every question that we put to you, and you just had a wealth of information to share with us. This has been most enlightening, and we appreciate all of your time. I'm going to close by also thanking my Missouri colleagues who collaborated with us in putting this program together. My fellow board member at World Affairs St. Louis, Susan Lohr, Lorna Curdy, the strategic administrator of World Affairs St. Louis, Matthew Hughes, the executive director of the International Relations Council in Kansas City, and his colleague, Evan Verplo, who managed the technology apparently flawlessly. So thanks to all of them. And of course, Julian Schuster asked me to extend his best wishes to you, Mr. Ambassador. He didn't want to speak on the program, but he did ask that we extend his personal best wishes to you. Thank you all. Thanks to our audience. You were great participants, and I hope you enjoyed this program as much as we did. Good afternoon and good evening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Glassman, for having me today. Thank you.